That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, since we are officially past 99% of trade deadlines, really the only way that you're going to be able to go through and make adjustments with your roster at this point of the season will be out there grinding the waiver wire harder than anybody else. I imagine a lot of people at this point, they're already out of the fantasy football playoffs. They have no shot. But if you're watching this video, if you've been following us all season, I'd imagine that we have that playoff berth. So we are going to be able to go through and talk about some waiver wire options. But before we do so, we have to give away some free Fantasy Flock Network hats for the people going down there, dropping those likes, leaving those comments. We got Frolicking Heifer and Ethan coming out with winning Fantasy Flock Network hats. Could have sworn Frolicking Heifer has already gotten one, but nonetheless, when you win that hat, please make sure you go there and send me that email ASAP with your physical address so I can get that out to you. And lastly, before we get into the waiver wire options, please make sure you go check out Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, we have said this a million times before, but we are about to get a ton of drafts going over there on the live streams. They have player props you can go check out every single week. I will say, we lost an embarrassing amount of money with player props this past week. We got so many wrong. But, you can be an automatic winner right now if you go through and you use promo code FLOCK when you sign up. Because when you use promo code FLOCK and when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy, they'll match that first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So please take advantage of that. And yeah, that should be it. Let's go through and let's talk about these waiver wire options. And usually we go through and we start off with the running backs. Let's not start with the running backs this video because I think that there's a clear quarterback. There's a clear tight end that we need to be picking up. The quarterback, obviously, Taysom Hill. With Taysom Hill dropping damn near 25 fantasy points this week against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, of course, with Taysom Hill, it didn't look great on Thursday night. Yeah, with Hill, he comes out. He has 4 interceptions. Now, with Taysom Hill, he's the exact same quarterback he's always been. He's the exact same player you've always looked at in New Orleans. He is a quarterback that isn't that good from a real life standpoint, but just like what we were discussing earlier this season with Jalen Hurts, these quarterbacks that aren't that good for real life standards, it doesn't matter when they're picking up the amount of rushing production that you have with someone like Taysom Hill. It's so boring to talk about, but it's so damn important that everybody knows here that we're not playing Madden. We're not real life NFL general managers. We're not going through and saying, who's the most talented quarterback, Carson Wentz or Taysom Hill? Of course, you would probably rather have Carson Wentz if you're an NFL franchise. But if we're talking about going through and building a fantasy, the key word here is fantasy football team, where you get 1 point for every 10 rushing yards and 1 point for every 25 passing yards. Those rushing quarterbacks are cheat codes at the position. We already went through, dived into the production that you had with Taysom Hill as the rushing quarterback last year. Now, looking at Taysom Hill at the same time, this week in particular, 101 rushing yards. Going out there with 101 rushing yards. Now, yes, he doesn't get a rushing touchdown, but just to kind of show y'all exactly how important this rushing production is for these quarterbacks, let's go through and let's convert this 101 rushing yards. And let's say he was a Matthew Stafford. Let's say he was a Kirk Cousins. He was that pocket passing quarterback option that's not going to be picking up anything on the ground. What would that look like with his passing volume? If you convert that 100 rushing yards over to passing yards, just because, with fantasy football, it's not real life. It's a cheat code. That's putting his 264 passing yards he had this past week at over 500. It's just math. Fantasy football is just math at the end of the day. So yeah, Taysom Hill isn't the best quarterback in the world. He's going up against the New York Jets this week. I know, yes, he did have that finger injury. Now, I will say, reports have come out, and no surgery. He's expected to play, only rostered in 34% of leagues. I can guarantee you Taysom Hill will be a top 10 quarterback for us this week. And going over to the tight end position, I can guarantee you that Tyler Conklin is going to be a top 10 tight end for us. Now, this is a tight end that's had a volume every single week already in Minnesota. I mean, he's been a very consistent tight end already for the Minnesota Vikings. And now that role is going to be expanding. He's only rostered in 30% of leagues on Yahoo Fantasy right now. This is a tight end that's had 64 targets so far this season, only 3 receiving touchdowns as well. You're going to be assuming that touchdown rate actually takes a jump up going forward. Now, he's not going to be seeing the same level of touchdown rate that you would have with someone like Rob Gronkowski. We discussed Rob Gronkowski, knowing that his role in the red zone and at the same time his frame is going to be leading to him scoring touchdowns at a significantly higher rate than league average. I think Conklin will have a lower touchdown rate than league average, just considering the fact he's a 6'3", 254-pound tight end that hasn't necessarily shown us that he's going to have a large role in the red zone. But it doesn't really matter because you have the injury with Adam Thielen. I mean, I am recording this on Sunday night, so please keep in mind any videos that get out on this channel are being recorded the day before, so we can have Thomas, the God editor, going through and fixing these up for y'all. But yeah, here with Adam Thielen, the most recent report that we have had on this injury is, I mean, he suffered the high ankle sprain. And with this being a high ankle sprain for Adam Thielen, we don't have an exact timetable from the team doctors. I'm expecting that this is a multi-week injury. You're going to be without Adam Thielen here for a decent amount of time. I think that makes it where you have to assume that there are going to be targets available in this Minnesota Vikings offense. Conklin had 9 targets this past week. If he's going to be getting this bump up, keep in mind that maybe you just look at his role in the red zone change slightly, because Adam Thielen was that player that was getting every single target inside the 10-yard line before for this offense. So it's going to be a little bit different here. Tyler Conklin should see that bump up with his production. He had 9 targets this past week. I think he is a top 10 tight end going forward. And now let's go over to the running back position. And like I said, going back to us recording this on Sunday night, you are going to have to continue to go through and monitor the injury reports that we have for some of these players, including Miles Sanders. Now, you know we're going to be live streaming every single night this week, so I can go through and I can give you updates with Miles Sanders at the same time, but please do your due diligence before your waiver wire actually runs, because if Miles Sanders is clear to go this next week, I don't think we should be running out and picking up the combination of Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. The last report that we are looking at with Miles Sanders here is that, I mean, it's not necessarily deemed as serious, but he wasn't returning to that game initially when he injured that ankle. And keep in mind, this is a running back that, I mean, has been dealing with just a multitude of injuries so far this entire season. You didn't know if he was playing coming into this week. Now, what's nice with Miles Sanders is he does get the bye week to recover in week 14. Now, if Miles Sanders were to miss, Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott will now be playable if this offense has Gardner Minshew at the quarterback position going forward, because you are not going to be getting Gardner Minshew vulturing those rushing touchdowns away like Jalen Hurts did previously. And also, because Gardner Minshew isn't going to be that rushing quarterback, he won't be looking to go through and tuck the ball and run whenever he doesn't have his receiving options there. He actually will be willing to check the ball out of the backfield. We saw this with the usage that you had from Miles Sanders getting a couple targets this past week before that injury. And also, I mean, you had someone like Kenneth Gainwell, I mean, with an impressive game, definitely. Now, I know that right now, I mean, Boston Scott is the more well-owned running back. Boston Scott's at 41%. Kenneth Gainwell actually has the better day in fantasy this week in particular. Now, with Kenneth Gainwell, he ends up dropping close to 20 fantasy points. Now, yes, that's fueled off of a rushing touchdown that he did have. And yes, it was a very easy matchup against the New York Jets, but still, he did have 5 receptions out of the backfield here for 33 receiving yards. And if you don't have Jordan Howard, if you don't have Miles Sanders coming back in week 15, I actually think that maybe you could go through and consider starting Kenneth Gainwell. And now our next running back is honestly going to be a pretty bad call. I'm putting him on this list for those deep formats, and I will say this is not the week to be going to the running back position for the waiver wire. We're going to have some much better options at the wide receiver position later on this video. But Rashaad Penny. Now, I get it. Yes, with Rashaad Penny, he was the 3rd running back in fantasy points scored in this backfield this week. Now, if you're looking at Travis Homer getting the long rushing touchdown, you're looking at Adrian Peterson seeing the majority of the carries here, where Adrian Peterson gets 11 carries compared to Rashaad Penny's 10. But keep in mind, this was Rashaad Penny's first week back from this injury. And It's so damn frustrating. I will say I'm very biased with Rashaad Penny. I loved him coming into the NFL draft back in 2018. But with Rashaad Penny 2 to 3 weeks ago, he actually did take the start for the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, he injured his hamstring the first play, so it ended up being the Alex Collins show. But we've already seen that Seattle wants to implement Rashaad Penny as their starting running back. And this week in particular, he did see the majority of snaps in this backfield for the Seattle Seahawks with 29. Now, maybe this is just indicating that they're going to be turning this into the Rashaad Penny show going forward because, of course, if you're looking at any efficiency statistics, it's going to be skewed in the way of Travis Homer, considering the fact that Travis Homer is a running back that off of that one touch, had a significant amount of production. But in reality, Rashaad Penny had a fine day this week. He comes out, he has 10 carries, 35 rushing yards. He has a 27-yard reception at the same time. Now, I know that's not necessarily jumping off the page for you, but if you compare this to what you have with, say, someone like Adrian Peterson's efficiency, just like what you saw in Tennessee, Peterson does not look like a good running back. Peterson, 16 yards off of 11 carries. I think if Seattle was smart, they would phase out Adrian Peterson here. They would give a slightly larger role to Rashaad Penny. What's really nice is we have the matchup of the Houston Texans upcoming. So I think this will be a team that's looking to run the ball consistently. So maybe we will get some clarity on this situation after this week. And now our last running back is going to be owned in more leagues. I'm surprised to see that he is only owned in 40% of Yahoo leagues at the moment. This can be Dontrell Hilliard. Just a reminder coming out of the bye. Maybe someone dropped them during the bye week if they had to go through and pick up another player with an empty roster spot. But Dontrell Hilliard did have 16 points in week 11 against the Houston Texans. And that was mainly fueled off of what he had as the receiving down running back here for Tennessee. And then he had, the following week against the New England Patriots, and obviously a brutal matchup with only one reception out of the backfield. He was able to go out there and get 20 fantasy points off of 131 rushing yards and the rushing touchdown at the same time. So please keep Dontrell Hilliard on your waiver wire. There's no reason that he should be out there and available to anybody pick up. As well as Donta Foreman. With Donta Foreman, rostered in even less leagues. And of course, we got to throw up the hook'em horns. We have to do that. And with Foreman, going back 2 weeks ago against the New England Patriots, he dropped over 100 rushing yards with 19 carries at the same time. Now, you're never going to be expecting him to be a great receiving down running back. That's not even who he was coming out of Texas. I will be the first one to admit that. But still, this is going to be a really good matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 14. If anybody decided to go through and drop either running back, you can take advantage. Now let's go over to a wide receiver that we had on our waiver wire video last week. He comes out and plays his first week of football that we have seen in a very long time here. Devonte Parker. Devonte Parker right now rostered in 48% of leagues. So you can pretty much go through and pick up Devonte Parker in half of those league formats. I'd imagine that if you're playing in a 12-man league, there's no way in hell that Devonte Parker is available. But if you're playing in a 10-team format, you can go through and you can pick him up. And this past week, yes, of course, it's still the Jalen Waddle show. Jalen Waddle's the wide receiver one the rest of the season. Nobody's going to be making an argument against that. But with Devonte Parker, he had another very impressive week. With Devonte Parker, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 62 receiving yards. Now, yes, it was an easy matchup against the New York Giants, but this was his first week back from that injury. This was his second week playing since week 4 this season. And with Devonte Parker, going back and looking at what we had the other week he played, in week 8, he actually had 11 targets. And to go along with this, 8 receptions, 85 receiving yards. We know Devonte Parker, he does profile to be that alpha X wide receiver. Now, the issue with Parker, and why I think that this is going to be especially important for me to bring up now, because you can see some other teams go through and drop him, is he does have a bye week in week 14. So it's not going to be a position where you can go through and pick up Devonte Parker and then automatically go through and just plug and play him. But maybe if you see someone go through and drop him and you have that extra roster spot and you could just throw him on the end of your team, I think Devonte Parker maybe is someone that we can look to play later on in the season. And now let's go to the most popular wide receiver pickup of the week. It's not even going to be close. Let's go over to Russell Gage. And earlier this season, I came out and I said if I ever told someone to play Russell Gage in their league, they needed to go through and just unsubscribe to the channel. But times have changed. We were a little heated when we said that. And maybe I'm just bringing that up to remind y'all that maybe this is a horrendous call. We were a little heated when we said that. That was back in week 8 against the Carolina Panthers, where Russell Gage had a total of 0 targets, 0 receptions, 0 yards, 0 touchdowns while playing the entire game. So let me put that out there. But this week in particular against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 12 targets, 11 receptions, 130 receiving yards. If you're looking at what we've had over the past 3 weeks, Russell Gage is a wide receiver now averaging over 9 targets a game. Of course, you can be very excited about that kind of volume. I mean, you don't have Calvin Ridley apparently coming back anytime soon. With Russell Gage, we saw the production back in 2020 when he was a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2, whenever you were missing one of Calvin Ridley or Julio Jones in this offense. Now you have neither. You still have Kyle Pitts drawing the majority of the opponent's defense's attention. It's never going to be a scenario where the defensive coordinator goes, you know what? We're getting killed here. Russell Gage is laying it on us. Please, let's just draw some of that safety attention that we have from Kyle Pitts with his elite speed off the top. And let's kind of go through and move that to the side of the field of Russell Gage. No, that's never going to happen. The defensive coordinators are never going to be too worried about Russell Gage here. I think that you see this role be very safe in this offense going forward. Now, our next wide receiver will be KJ Osborne, a very popular waiver wire pickup at the beginning of the season. Definitely, has been dropped in the majority of leagues. At this point, he's rostered in 3% of Yahoo leagues, so he's available in 97% of them. And with KJ Osborne, he comes out, he sees 14.7 fantasy points. This is by far and away the best stat line you've had since the bye week. Since the bye week, you've had KJ Osborne coming out 3 points, 3 points, 0 points, 2 points, 1 point. He has not had a game with over 3.0 fantasy points since week 6 outside of week 13. So yes, you had a very disappointing stretch of games. It's understandable. KJ Osborne isn't a good wide receiver, and he was playing in an offense that runs a lot of 2 wide receiver sets with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. I am not sure you've heard, but Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, they are pretty good wide receivers, but at the same time, you have a ankle sprain for Adam Thielen now, so KJ Osborne is going to be sliding up, and he is going to be one of those wide receivers that's playing in those 2 wide receiver sets that you have the Minnesota Vikings almost running exclusively here, especially with no Dalvin Cook. Maybe this is an offense that really has no option but to just go through and continue to throw the ball. We've already kind of discussed this with Tyler Conklin. So yeah, I want to be giving a bump up to KJ Osborne. There's no reason for him to only be rostered in 3% of leagues. And now our next wide receiver, we went through, and last week we just said it was time to give up. It was time to just go through and throw in the towel. And now he drops 25 points on us. Amari St Brown, 12 targets, 10 receptions, 86 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown at the same time. Amari St Brown is, very similar to what you have with Hunter Renfrow. I would say he's Hunter Renfrow in a bad offense, to be completely honest. And I think that if you're playing in a half PPR league, if you're playing in a non-PPR league, I don't care about Amari St Brown. This is just strictly for full PPR formats where you know that there are a lot of targets available in Detroit. Now, those targets are not going to be very efficient at all, considering the fact that this is an offense that really is not going to be looking to aggressively throw the ball down the field. This is an offense that instead is just operating as a dink and dunk offense where Amari St. Brown can pick up some cheap targets across the line of scrimmage. He's going to be a very unathletic slot wide receiver. But an unathletic slot wide receiver can still be productive in a PPR format if he's going to be getting 12 targets every single week. And outside of that, I think that we should be good. The options on the waiver wire this week aren't fantastic. I really hope that you went through and you built around that running back depth coming into the week, because it looks like there are not going to be any running backs coming in saving the day off the waiver wire. Of course, you could go through, you could talk a little bit about Sonny Michel here. Sonny Michel rostered in every single league. And actually, you know who we should talk about? I apologize for teasing all that this video was done. Maybe we need to talk a little bit about Carlos Hyde here. Because Carlos Hyde, I'd imagine that he's now available in a lot of 10-team formats. James Robinson did fumble the ball at the beginning of this game, and that's why the snap data is looking like it's a little bit skewed. And with James Robinson, he is not fully healthy. Why it's hard for me to tell y'all to go through and pick up Carlos Hyde as well. Yes, Carlos Hyde did see the bump up in his role. The issue is Carlos Hyde still almost in the same situation that he was in, where maybe Carlos Hyde, yes, gets an additional 6 touches every single week here, but you're really only going to be starting him if you do have the injury to James Robinson. Bringing him as an active player. If James Robinson's inactive this next week, there we can go through and consider starting Carlos Hyde, knowing you'll get every single touch out of the backfield. But that's really in that only scenario. And of course, thank you so much for coming out, hanging out with us in the live stream. If you have not done so already, please make sure you go down there, drop that like on the video. It helps us out so much. And of course, what helps us out way more than that is by going and signing up on Underdog Fantasy. Go use promo code FLOCK, make that first deposit. When you make that first deposit, they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100 with promo code FLOCK. Available in damn near every single state. You can go over there and you can get that first deposit bonus so you can start losing money just like I did this past week on Underdog. But of course, thank you so much for everybody supporting the channel. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I really hope that you have a great day.